It's one of the most extraordinary moments in Britain's history. Prime Minister Boris Johnson refusing calls from his own cabinet to resign. Nine's Brett McLeod is outside the Prime Minister's residence. Brett, the Queen could be dragged into this mess.
Yeah, this is the site of one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded by man.
Arson could be the cause of a fire at the Sydney home of controversial comedian, commentator and YouTuber Friendly Geordies.
Supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies.
And to get hot, I got hairy legs that turn turn blonde in the sun.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Episode 13. Okay. Alright, let's try that again. Welcome back to episode 13 of Fence Sitters. We're finally back after a week and a half hiatus. Obviously, things are pretty busy with both of us at the moment, but we would be even trying to get one out today. Some interesting things to talk about. I'm Tiago, as always. I'm with Will. How are you doing, Will? You're in Greece at the moment.
Yes, I am in Greece. So last time we did an episode, I was in France, south of Paris, and then we blasted through Italy in 10 days, and then we took a ferry, and now we're on the island of Corfu off the western coast of Greece. And it's a very interesting island. It was ruled by Venice, like the Venetians, for a large period of time, which is pretty interesting. Like hundreds of years, actually, it was ruled by Venice. And then it was ruled by like the Napoleonic French when they took over Venice, and then Britain took it, and then it was finally handed back to Greece in like the 1860s. Lots of interesting like French culture, British culture, like Venetian architecture, obviously Greek food, and now it's properly part of Greece. So yeah, it's a very it's an interesting island. But talking on national things, I need to make an apology.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
public apology. Which I haven't looked at the emails or the comments, but I'm hoping someone picks up on this. But in the last episode, we were talking about the G7.
Yeah.
And I only named 6 countries.
Oh. Who did you
in
forget?
The G7, which is a little bit problematic. And of course, the one country which I did forget, because I sadly didn't think it was popular enough to be in there, was Italy. And of course, a few days later, I arrived in Italy, and I suddenly realized that Italy was in the G7. So apologies, the nation of Italy. I'm very sorry about that, and I would like to clarify that the G7 is actually made up of the USA, Canada, UK, France, Italy, Japan, and Germany. So there you go. 7 nations in the G7. I'm very sorry, Italy.
Oh boy.
But anyway.
So
that's
Apologies
that's out of the way.
aside, I mean, we could apologize for many things in this show, but instead of doing that, let's talk about what we're reading this week. Will.
Yeah.
What have you been reading?
What have I been reading? Well, I don't know. Do you want to go first?
I forgot what I was... Oh, yes. Okay, yes. I'll go first. I rewatched a movie this week that I haven't seen in many, many years. I'm sure you'll be familiar with this one, Will. I watched Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark in preparation for the new film coming out. And let me tell you, what a fantastic movie. Like, I know everyone knows it's a fantastic movie, but you kind of have to go back and watch it again, and you realize...
Which one is it again? Because I know Last Crusade, and then...
It's the one where, spoiler alert for this, like, 40-year-old, 30-year-old movie, they all get their faces melted off at the end.
Oh, yes, yeah. Very good. The Nazis.
But yeah, just a lot of really solid stuff, especially for the time in there. Like, everything looks great still. I think that's a thing of being shot on film. It just ages so nicely. All the special effects, practical. When they're in, like, I don't remember, they're in they're in a town, and they all had diarrhea on set because they'd all been eating foreign food. And so all the fight scenes and stuff, they're like sweating and they look really sickly, and it just works in the movie so well.
Jeez.
So
how did you find that?
I watched a video on it before I watched it, which like inspired me to go back and watch it. But no, really good. Some highlights. There's the very famous scene where the guy with the sword, he's swinging it about, and he shoots him. He's about to get on an airplane, or they're like chasing after an airplane. There's a big buff guy, and they're having the big punch out. And then he puts the guy into the blade of the propeller of the plane. Yeah. So just really good, solid stuff all around. And if you haven't rewatched that movie in a while, I would highly recommend just going back and having a good time and having a watch. But yeah, that's what I've been watching. Nothing too deep. But yeah.
I don't know, Indiana Jones, I feel like it hits. I mean, it's almost a bit like what's it called? Jurassic Park, but in a way that it kind of hits like it hits a niche. Or like a more accurate analogy would be Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, it hits a niche which can't really be done again, but it hits it really well.
Yeah.
And no, I think it's pretty underrated. Pretty underrated in the modern kind of.
It's like everyone knows about it, but no one talks about it. I feel. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because it's like everyone talks about Star Wars still constantly, and that's probably a thing of it's still going as well. But a little bit forgotten Indiana Jones, and I am saying that with a new movie coming up, which hopefully will be all right, but we'll see. Yeah. Anyway,
with CGI Harrison Ford. Well, not CGI.
Like
they
de-aged,
partly edited him.
Yeah. What have you been reading, Will?
What have I been reading? Well, I kind of got into a bit of a reading slump on this grand tour, so I forced myself to go to a bookshop in the main train station of Rome, which so far, I've been in a lot of European train stations. The main Roman train station is very good. 5 out of 5. It's built on 3 levels, right? So the underground level is connected to the metro, like the underground metro network, right? And then you go up elevators, and then it's like the main overground large railway lines. And then you go up another level, and then it's like a dining lounge. And it just flows perfectly. And so we originally came out into the middle level. We exited the station and I saw this bookshop and I was like, okay, one section bookshop looks good. I might go in there on the way back. I went in there and I found out that it actually goes across all 3 levels. It was the largest bookshop I had ever been in. It was insane. Of course, almost all the books were in Italian, so that slightly dampened my amazement. But I found it in an English section and I picked up a copy of Jack Kerouac's On the Road, as you can see there.
Oh, there you go.
I'm not sure if you've heard of Jack Kerouac before, Tiago.
No, I haven't.
No, so it's a pretty famous book. He's from this thing called the Beat Generation, which I've been doing a little bit of research into, and it's pretty much like they were like the OG hippies. So it's literally kind of post World War II, like the second half of the 40s into the early 50s. There were all of these young, experimental, enthusiastic kind of like New York East Coast intellectuals. And like half of them dropped out of uni and they're all doing drugs and kind of becoming sexually liberated and saying no to like consumerist kind of commodities. And they all agreed that they needed to kind of go on this quest to discover the rest of America and kind of travel west into the great unknown. So Jack Kerouac does the same thing. And he pretty much goes on this epic adventure in like the late 40s and he writes about it and he creates a fictional version of himself and a fictional version of all of his kind of crazy intellectual friends as they travel west. And the stuff he gets up to in the book, it's insane. Like, he ends up on like a flatbed truck blasting across like the Nevada desert, through the night, and you have to literally hold on, or else you like fall off the thing. And he ends up in a car, like, in like the snowy hills of Texas or whatever, and the whole windscreen has iced over, so the person driving has to like stick his head out the window and drive along this major highway. And the other thing you remember is it's all like in the late 1940s.
Yeah.
So it's completely crazy. And his writing style is insane. Like, he calls it spontaneous prose. And I was looking into some of his writing style and the stuff he got up to. Like, you talk about the tortured artist.
Yeah.
This guy, for 3 weeks, sat himself at a typewriter and he taped pieces of paper together to make them 37 meters long to fit into his typewriter, so he could write non-stop through 37 meters of paper. And his girlfriend would be there, and she would give him like pea soup and coffee and like drugs, and just to keep him going, like non-stop for 3 weeks, writing into these 47 meters piece of paper. And so I feel like this is a becoming theme of me reading on the show, but I have another excerpt which I would like to read out, if that's all right. So just have that picture in your head of this like crazed guy typing down this typewriter. And so he writes this: "And for just a moment, I had reached the point of ecstasy that I had always wanted to reach, which was the complete step across chronological time into timeless shadows, and wonderment in the bleakness of the mortal realm, and the sensation of death kicking at my heels to move on, with a phantom dogging its own heels, and myself hurrying to a plank where all the angels drove off, and flew into the holy void of uncreated emptiness, the potent and inconceivable radiances shining in bright mind essence, innumerable lotus lands falling open in the magic moth swarm of heaven. I can hear an indescribable seething roar, which wasn't in my ear but everywhere and had nothing to do with sounds. I realized that I had died and been reborn numberless times, but just didn't remember especially because the transitions from life to death and back to life are so ghostly easy, a magical action for naught, like falling asleep and waking up again a million times. The utter casualness and deep ignorance of it. I felt sweet, swinging bliss, like a big shot of heroin in the mainline vein, like a gulp of wine late in the afternoon, and it makes you shudder. My feet tingled. I thought I was going to die at the very next moment. It's just, I mean,
it's a bit insane.
It's insane.
Yeah. That's cool. That's actually really cool.
Yeah. And this was like
we've talked about.
Yeah,
I love it when an artist or someone that's really good at their craft just throws it all at the wall. We've had this conversation, and that seems like what that is. Just doing crazy.
Pretty
stuff.
much. He just goes for it. Lets nothing hold him back.
Yeah.
And people listening or watching this, you might think, this is those bloody intellectual authors thinking they're just they can write all this fancy shit, and it ain't bloody Dickens. Like, the thing is, like, the most of the book is down to earth basic stuff about him like trying to find money to put like gas in his car, or like trying to like his intricate like relationships with his friends, or like accidentally having an affair with like this Mexican woman and then starting a family with her in like a grapevine ranch in like on the border of Mexico. Like, there's really down to earth, simple, just like authentic language, and then he'll kind of go into a flow of like what I just read you, and then he'll come back down to earth, and it's that like mix of the two which make him so readable. So yeah, anyone who's like if anyone who's reached like a rush in their life and about to go on a big adventure, wants to go on a big adventure, or needs to make a decision, just read On the Road, and it'll sort you out. It really will. I mean, even Bob Dylan's on the back, and he says, "It changed my life like it changed everyone else's."
Oh, there you go.
So if it changed Bob Dylan's life, it can change yours.
Well, very good. I've got to pick up a book to go camping with this next week, so maybe I'll have a look.
I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to our first segment? Or was there something else you want to say?
Indeed. No, not really. That was it. That was my rant.
All right, so let's go a little locally, back to our lovely, beautiful state of WA. We've had, I guess you could call it a leadership spill. Not that there was no backstabbing or anything exciting like that.
Call it a spill.
That's what
I'd call it a.
That's what's being written up as, officially,
okay,
I guess.
Right.
But our boy, our God Emperor, gets all the votes from everyone in the entire state. Mark McGowan he is resigned as Premier.
Yes, resigned. Yeah.
So
do you have any thoughts on this, Tiago?
Oh, I was wanting to get your initial thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really meant to like him, so I. He's the thing which gets me about Mark McGowan is he just from a non-political view, he seems like a pretty decent chap who just tries his best and does what he thinks is right and works hard. I mean, there's been a few resignations as of late, with perhaps Nicola Sturgeon up in Scotland or Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, where they claim, as Mark McGowan did, that it was tiredness and exhaustion that they left. But you know, Jacinta Ardern has an election coming up, which doesn't look too favourable for what's her name again? The Scottish lady, Nicola Sturgeon. There's been a whole number of crazy scandals which have come out after she's resigned. But with Mark, I mean, the next election's in 2025 for WA. He was going to win it anyway, almost definitely. And he's resigned now, and it doesn't. I mean, there's been a few scandals. There's one thing about the Perth Mint which I want to bring up, which I think is rather interesting. But apart from that, it seems like a pretty genuine, like, just exhaustion. You know, he's just had too much and has calling it quits. And he's even he's stood down as MLA for his constituency of Rockingham. And then now there's going to be a by-election in Rockingham on July the 29th. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Tiago?
No, I for the most part agree with you, but I think that I fully empathize with him wanting to step down. Like, and as you said, I feel like he's got quite a bit of integrity, and he's just trying to do what's right, regardless of what you think of his politics. He's sticking to his guns. He's going for exactly what he wants to do, what he thinks best for the state, and with that comes a lot of criticism. When you look at the actual polling, obviously much more in his favor than not, but the criticism of someone in a very tightly held opinion and position of that he is in is a lot nastier and a lot more like sharp-toothed than if he was sort of neutral in the thing. So you can imagine there's in some ways quite drastic measures he took during like the COVID pandemic, and you could see why getting threats of violence and all that constantly, regardless of how well you're doing, when you have a family, I wouldn't stay as premier with doing all that. Like, look, he's done, in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes, so much good, and he gets praise for it, but also he gets to be premier. He gets a decent salary that he could be getting higher somewhere else, but also people constantly, you know, I've heard stories of threats being made to him and his family, and being seen places and being harassed, and it's like, obviously he's done good. I think he knows he's done good, and I think he trusts where the leadership will fall once he leaves, which we'll get into in a second. And I think he said, all right, I don't need to be here anymore. I'm content with doing something a bit quieter. Let's go from here. But yeah, that's sort of my main thoughts.
I did some research on him a little bit, and just a few little things as to kind of almost the Tyson he became. So he became the Labour leader in 2012, And I think there was a WA state election in 2013, which obviously he didn't win. And a lot of people were saying then, it's like, oh, this Mark McGowan guy, he's pretty humble. Not many people know about him. He's probably not going to come back from this. There isn't really much hope for him. And then, of course, he has that landslide election in 2017, bumps out Colin Barnett. And then in 2021, after he kind of handles quite a lot of the coronavirus crisis, he has a massive landslide and wins 53 out of the 59 available seats, which I think is unseen in Western Australian political history. It's insane. And it's interesting. He was also he was in the Navy, based at Gardner Island beforehand. And I remember, did you watch his resignation speech?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that bit when he was talking about driving, was it like a Corolla across the Nullarbor to his rusty old Corolla to get up to his position in the Navy in Gardner Island? I mean, he just, he seems to have a bit of a interesting kind of hard-working path to him, which I admire. But regardless, there are a few things which I would like to bring up because I didn't realize this was a thing. So this Perth Mint doping scandal. Have you heard much about this, Tiago?
Not a huge amount, no. Enlighten me.
Yeah. So just to put it out there, I get all of this information was from the ABC to start with. So apparently, in between 2018 and 2021, the Perth Mint were consciously doping their gold that they make with silver to decrease its quality, just to allow them to produce more. And the thing was, between 2018 and 2021, they were selling it to the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which, of course, they do anyway. The Perth Mint sells gold exchanges all over the world. But they were selling this doped gold from 2018 to 2001 to the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And, of course, Mark McGowan, making himself treasurer, was meant to be in charge of the Perth Mint from 2017 to 2021. And they only stopped doping the gold in September 2021 when the Chinese in Shanghai were like, well, hold on a second. What's all this gold you're giving us? This isn't proper gold. This is doped gold. And so Mark McGowan claims that he didn't have he wasn't made aware of it. The Perth Mint are pretty independent. They get on there, do their own stuff. Him as treasurer or premier, you're running things, So he wasn't really made aware of it until I think there was like a Four Corners program which exposed all of it really quite recently. So Mark McGowan's predecessor, this guy called Bill Johnston, so he then kind of took control of the Perth Mint. So Bill Johnston was made aware of this in January 2022, over a year and a half ago, and didn't actually let Mark McGowan know. So that's kind of where with this Bill Johnson guy obviously being part of the Labour government, it starts to look a little bit suspicious. And so Shane Love, who is the head of the Nationals in the West Australian Parliament, he's called, also the head of the opposition, he's called for a royal commission, and the Labour Party have kind of just pushed that under the rug and not really consented to the idea of a royal commission going ahead. And then this is the bit which really got me, is that it's okay, well, so they're not going for a royal commission, then within a parliamentary setting, you can set up parliamentary committees to investigate these things. And so you've got a large breadth of people sitting on these committees to investigate them. But Shane Love isn't doing that because to set up a parliamentary committee in the lower house of the West Australian Parliament, they don't have enough opposition members to create an opposition kind of, or they don't have enough opposition members to create a committee which would be truthful enough and have a wide variety of opinion to actually investigate this kind of metal doping scandal. And you think, okay, well, this metal doping, how bad can it really be? So apparently they don't have to buy back the gold from Shanghai, but if they did, I think the figure was something like $9 billion Australian dollars worth of gold would have to be brought back from Shanghai because it was incorrectly produced, consciously incorrectly produced, and was found out by this Labour guy and then wasn't told Mark McGowan. And now the opposition says, well, we can't really investigate it because the parliament is stacked full of Labour people. I mean, I don't know, like, and I even brought this up to a Labour MLA, Caitlin Collins, who's she's the member of the Legislative Assembly for the Whitfords electorate, and I was talking to her, and I was like, look, you've got 53 out of the 59 seats. Is that the threat for democracy? Like, how can you have a properly functioning parliament when, you know, almost every single seat is run by one party? Is this like the point where there's a healthy opposition and a healthy government with a healthy majority to get things done? Once you get beyond that point, which so rarely happens in our democracies, which is good about them, democracy starts to become unhealthy. And in my view, this doping scandal of the gold and Shane Love simply saying we can't even really begin to investigate it, like, that's just a sign of an unhealthy democracy. I mean, I don't know what. That's a bit of a ramble of a lot of things, but what are your thoughts on all of that?
I guess I don't know a huge amount about the whole doping thing, but I in terms of being a symptom of an unhealthy democracy, what do you do then? Because people voted for those people to be in those positions. That's democracy. And like, so do you say you can't hold this many more seats, or how do you go about changing that?
Well, I mean, yeah, that is the I mean, we've more or less just pointed out a major flaw of democracy. Is what if the majority gets too much power and then the minority, which I think people don't take into account. I don't know. Are we arguing against democracy, Tiago?
I don't know. Well, I will say this. I know a lot of people that actually voted Liberal in the last state election purely because they wanted a bit more evenness in Parliament because of the issue we're talking about here. But you're not going to have your average Joe Blow be thinking about that, are they? They're going to be thinking, look, the last Labour government looks like they got us out of the crash after the mining boom. They got us through COVID really well. I'm gonna vote for them. Not really thinking about these weird, nuanced, complex issues that come up when you have a democracy. Like, who's gonna be thinking about that? So on one hand, I'm kind of like, well, that. You cry about it. That's democracy for you, baby. But on the other hand, I do see where an issue like this would come up, and I guess then it falls into the hands of journalists and of the media to sort of point these things out and hopefully give people a better idea of what is actually happening, even if the opposition can't directly attack. Not that the media should always be attacking a government purely because it's in government. But it should still be holding these things to account, holding them accountable for things like this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think like a royal commission. I think a royal commission would be. I mean, that's a way which isn't political, which an investigation could occur in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When perhaps a parliamentary committee can't be formed.
2 seconds.
But yeah.
Yeah. Just what were you going to say?
We're just going to cook dinner, that's all.
Okay. Sorry, Will.
That's all good. Good. Do you need to go anywhere soon?
No,
or yeah?
It's fine.
No? Okay. Right. Back into it. But yeah, no, I think this. I mean, as you were saying, the average Joe Blogger on the street, we're sold democracy day after day after day after day. But I don't think the average Joe Blogger on the street realizes that if a single power in a democracy becomes too powerful, even through a democratic mean, that can result in the suppression of minority, of the minority being able to hold the majority to account. And people don't really realize that. And so I think we should be more aware of that. Because I mean, like, as this Labour government goes on and on and on and on and wins the 2025 election and goes on to 2027, 2028, and Roger Cook's been premier or whoever is premier by that point, it's like how, as the Labour machine becomes more tired, as they become a bit more relaxed in their hold in government, as they get a bit more clumsy, or, it's like I feel as if more and more and more of these problems will start popping up. These committees won't be able to be made to investigate them. And then I suppose eventually the system would sort itself out. There'd be an election, there'd be some kind of scandal, and then the Liberals would be in, and the process would start again. But it's just interesting, and I wanted to point that out to our viewers, that things like that within a democracy can and do happen. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see it happening within our home state of Western Australia.
Yes, and I will say this. There could be other stuff going on behind the scenes, but this is a kind of a small-scale example. Imagine if, I don't know, we're pumping out really harmful policy that affects everyone. I don't know what a good example would be. But just in like the interests of that party rather than in the interests of the people. Say, I don't know. I can't think of an apolitical example, but but
let's say tobacco firms were donating money to the Labour Party only if the Labour Party would take away some of the harmful taxes against tobacco.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
If you put it in a scenario like that, which perhaps is a lot more relatable for like the average person, rather than, silver and gold and the Reserve Bank of Shanghai, you would if you sort of think about it that way, you start to understand the problem a bit easier, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you know much about this Roger Cook chap?
I don't know how much I can say, Will.
Okay.
So, he might be a bit of a controversial pick. From what I've heard from talking to just general people around this Roger Cook guy, specifically, and because of the nursing strike and how he dealt with that, which when you can imagine in a state that is very, very pro-Labor, any bad look on the side of union, healthy unions like the nursing union, striking and not really getting what they wanted, is not a good look. And when you look at the guy that was sort of dealing with all that, and he's not particularly favourable, you go, well, was this really a wise choice for Labour to put this guy at the forefront? And
no, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
But where I think it comes from, I think this is their thinking, because of the handling of the pandemic. Obviously, Roger Cook played a large role in that. So they're probably thinking in their heads, oh, that's what people are going to associate with him, the handling of the pandemic. Let's put him into a leadership position, and then hopefully... And it's a name that people recognise as well. Like, I don't know if you could pick anyone else out of the WA Labour Party and know their name. So I think that's the thinking behind it. But interesting decision nonetheless.
Yeah, because you could almost, with what you were saying about the nurses union there, like, let's say 2 years down the track, there's another major union bust-up, or union versus government, and the union is really, connected to the down-to-earth average West Australian, and there's an election just around the corner. That could, and he stuffs that up, and because he's the leader, that really shows, that he's stuffing it up. That could be quite bad for him.
Yeah.
Because I suppose back in the day, old Mark McGowan could kind of brush those things off, but Roger Cook doesn't really have that political capital to get on with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's interesting. I actually I once had a chat with Roger Cook's secretary.
What? You're always meeting these obscure politicians and that.
No. I phoned Roger Cook's secretary. This was when we were having our little vaccination spat.
Our vaccination spat specifically?
Yeah.
Oh yes, I remember this.
Yeah. when and I was getting all wound up, and for people who didn't know, there were, if you wanted to go into, I don't know even why I'm explaining this, but if you wanted to go into the zone at Levers, you had to be vaccinated.
We should probably explain what the zone is. It's like the big party area when you go on Levers or schoolies after year 12.
It's a hellish cesspit of incongruent, dishevelled, just excuses of humanity. Anyway, I was getting all wound up and wanting to go to Levers, not really go to the zone, but needing to know if I needed my vaccine to get to Levers. So I phoned the health minister and got through to this lovely lady. I can't remember her name, sadly. I would have done a shout out if I could, but I phoned her up, and I was in quite a state, and she really calmed me down and calmly and politely explained to me that if I did not have my vaccination, I would definitely be able to at least go to the Four Seasons holiday park in Dunsborough.
No.
So there you go.
It's important to note, Will isn't anti-vax.
No,
this was a very specific thing.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable with the language that Roger Cook was using at the time in regards to. I can't remember the exact thing. I could quote it if I looked back, but I think he was saying that they were planning to use Levers and the zone as like a testing ground for a further,
I think it's for a vaccine passport they were looking at using.
Yeah, vaccine passport. They were throwing all those words around, which me as a, kind of small state conservative, I don't really enjoy that kind of stuff. So that's what I was more getting onto. The health benefits of the vaccine, I'm totally in line with. Anyway, all that kind of stuff. Roger Cook, I didn't realise that there was that different side of him, which you've just expressed. But it's interesting because he actually he established, where is it? He was the first president of the National Union of Students, Tiago. I'm not sure if you were aware of that.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, he actually established that when he was I think he was just out of university or in university, and he kind of conglomerated all of the student unions, in an Australian national sense, and he was the first president of that. And he also has a long history of working with the Indigenous community. So he worked with the Southwest Aboriginal Land and Sea Council before becoming an MLA, and he also worked with the Native Title Working Group. I don't know. He seems to be able to bring an interesting and varied level of expertise to the position, but obviously, from your point of view, there's some differing opinions there, which is expected, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to what we were saying before. When you know the name of someone in a party, you're more likely to not like them, and also more likely to like them. And again, name a third person in WA Labour,
Well, Caitlin Collins.
Okay, let's go to Rockingham and ask them if they know what Caitlin Collins is. Anyway.
Well, if you people watching or listening to this are also listening to the news, there's been another major resignation because Boris Johnson has resigned. Again, that's right, again. How can he resign again? Well, that's quite simple. It's because he was Prime Minister and he was resigning from that, and now he's resigning from actually being an MP, which is a whole other can of worms. So, Tiago, do you know much about what's happened?
I don't know about what's happened specifically. I know a fair bit about Boris Johnson, but no, I don't know about what's happened specifically here.
Okay, yeah. Well, what's kind of happened here is... So the reason, maybe we should go into the downfall.
Can I have a guess? Can I have a guess?
Yeah, go for it.
Has he got a position on some board somewhere? And
is he on a position on?
Has he got a position on a board, and then some scandal or something has come up? Another scandal has come up, and he's like, oh well, I guess I'll just go to my little board position and be fine.
Yeah, no, he doesn't actually. What's happened is a final aspect of a scandal, which was his largest scandal, which brought him down. By God, there was a lot of scandals. Has finally kind of almost been published, been released, this report. And he has seen the report before it's been published, and he's almost jumped ship before it's sunk, kind of thing. Jumped out before he was pushed to try and make himself, I don't know, perhaps easier for a comeback. Anyway, so what happened was, I'm sure yourself and the listeners know about all the Partygate scandals, because you have to put gate on all the end of every single bloody scandal. But so Partygate, so he was, there's videos, there's pictures, there's anecdotal evidence, repetitive anecdotal evidence of Boris Johnson breaking his own restriction and social distancing rules within 10 Downing Street and attending parties within 10 Downing Street while restrictions were in place. And then when the Commons and the House of Commons questioned him on this, he misled Parliament. He claims that he misled Parliament without knowing that he misled Parliament. And there's a lot of evidence to prove that he misled Parliament, knowing full well that he was misleading Parliament.
How would he do it without knowing?
He would do it without knowing. Well, this is where it gets difficult. He would do it without knowing by him, so the idea is, as a prime minister, he would have his advisors, and so the advisors would advise him that he had, his advisor would advise him that he hadn't broken the rules. So he would go to Parliament and he would mislead Parliament by lying because of his advisors that he hadn't broken the rules, and then it would come up later that the advisors were wrong. So he had actually broken the rules, but because of the advisors, he thought he hadn't. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
Yeah. But now it's kind of coming out that, well, actually, you knew from the very beginning, Boris, that you were misleading Parliament. And again, I'm quite enjoying this episode because we're going into a lot of parliamentary procedure. You're not, lying in Parliament, lying to the floor of the House of Commons or the Legislative Assembly is a big no-no. You don't... the Speaker can kick you out of the House, and there's a large number of repercussions which can occur if you knowingly lie to Parliament in regards to anything. So what pretty much happened is there's what's it called? The Commons Privileges Committee, which is this, again, like the committees I was talking about back in the West Australian Parliament, this Commons Privileges Committee, which, take note, has a majority of Conservative MPs on it, have been writing up this report, verifying what Boris Johnson has said. And once that report is published, Boris Johnson then has to face the consequences, which could be him being expelled from the party and from as being an MP. And so he got a copy. I think what happens is it's customary that they allow him to read the report before it's published.
Yeah. He
read the report. It's being published from Monday. It must be pretty damnable for him because he's more or less run off. And he's resigned his seat. So his seat is, he was MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, which is actually a contestable, it's a marginal seat at the moment. I'm not sure what the majority is, but it isn't too large.
Is that just because people don't like Boris? Is that why there's a...
Yeah, I think it's partly they might not like Boris. I think it's also, I don't know at all, but I would guess that there might be a strong bit of a Liberal Democrat kind of feel in the constituency. It might be Labour. I'm not sure. You'd be able to look at the statistics and find out. But it's entirely possible that Rishi Sunak would then lose that constituency. Another interesting thing which has been happening alongside this is that when a Prime Minister leaves office, they have an honours list which they publish, which pretty much means they can name a number of people who they want to become a knight or a dame, and to give awards like Order of the British Empire and stuff like that. There's this theory that because the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has to sign off on all these honours, there's a theory that Rishi Sunak refused to sign off on a few honours that Boris was going to give, and then Boris, in anger, resigned because of that and was trying to give Rishi this really hard by-election that he probably won't win. And then there was another ally of Boris Johnson, Nadine Dorries, who was meant to receive an honour, and then people are thinking Sunak blocked her receiving the honour. She's also resigned, so he has to face another by-election there. Lots of intricate little things. But anyway, Boris is gone as an MP. And in his resignation letter, he kind of said it was this big rambling letter. He was saying there was like this anti-Brexit conspiracy against him. The anti-growth people were out for him. He had a go at Harriet Harman, who's the Labour MP who heads the Commons Privileges Committee. He was doing all of this stuff, and then he finally he ended it with something like, "This is me gone for now," or like, "I've left Parliament for the moment," and he kind of left it on a cliffhanger, which makes you wonder what his next move will be.
Oh my god! What a guy! What a character! He doesn't seem to ever leave, does he? He always seems to be there. Since he was the mayor of London, it seems like we haven't heard the end of him. Yeah.
He's just, I don't know, I kind of liked him to start with. He seemed like he was intelligent and he knew what was what. And then there was like this bumbling buffoon kind of thing was a facade. But it seems now he still has the bumbling buffoonness, and the intelligence is just almost articulated towards like power and egotism and trying to get his own name in the papers. It's just, I'm more and more thoroughly despising the man and wish he would go away.
Yeah, I wonder, and this is less political and just speculation, but you wonder maybe having all that time and power maybe, deluded him. Maybe it was a bit of an act, being a bit of a buffoon, a bit more relatable to people. And, after you do that for so many years, it kind of sinks into you a bit. And you kind of become that and kind of lose what actually made you special and what got you to the position you're in the first place. And you just sort of become this, like, pop politician, which everyone likes to laugh and talk about. It's very entertaining, no doubt, but like, I don't know. It's like saying things like, "I'm gone from Parliament for now" is very like, he thinks he's the main character of some sort of political drama.
But anyway, so not great in that regard. But then I have, again, this is just the anecdotal episode. I have a funny story about Boris Johnson.
Here we go.
Which relates to Perth. So I'm bringing fence sitting together, Perth and Britain as one. So get this right. I have a friend, which will remain nameless, who is introduced to a guy who is friends with Boris Johnson's father.
Yeah.
So Boris Johnson's father is Stanley Johnson, who's kind of a minor, celebrity kind of guy in his own right. And anyway, so whenever Stanley Johnson comes and does like an Australian holiday, he often stays with this friend of his in Perth. And this friend lives in Mullaloo. So Stanley Johnson, Boris Johnson's father, has come to Mullaloo. And then apparently on one holiday, Boris Johnson came with them. And there are pictures of Boris Johnson standing at Whitford's nose. How insane is that? And like down at the beach at Mullaloo and just at Whitford's shopping centre, it's like Boris Johnson.
Fence Sitter's exclusive scoop.
It is. This is exclusive reveal. Boris Johnson has visited the northern suburbs of Perth. He's been with his shopping centre. He's been with his nose. He's been on Mullaloo Beach, and there's photographic evidence of it. I hear. I haven't actually seen the photos, but I have good anecdotal evidence to support the claim. But imagine walking down the coast road and just like running into Boris Johnson at Whitford's nose. I mean,
for those of you who don't live in the Perth northern suburbs, you always bump into the most obscure people on the coastal road when you're going for a walk down it.
You do on the coast,
and it kind of makes sense that you'd bump into Boris Johnson,
It would. Yeah. And I don't know, running off this funny story of bumping into people, I have another little funny story.
Yeah.
Which we have time to put it in, and we haven't got much else to talk about, so I can talk about it. Do you remember, Tiago, your your uncle talking about Christopher Hitchens.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you remember the public intellectual Christopher Hitchens?
Yes.
One of the kind of main atheists, a very prolific writer, a very prolific thinker, quite controversial. Anyway, he sadly died of cancer a few years ago, or actually I think maybe even like 1 or 2 years ago. So he has a brother, which I think I've talked about before, Peter Hitchens. And Peter Hitchens is a little bit less known. He's more political. His brother's kind of more left-wing. Peter Hitchens is more right-wing, a bit more conservative. I actually quite admire some of the stuff he talks about. And anyway, so as you know, I was in London recently, and I was just walking down the main street in Marylebone. And of course, who comes cycling towards me but Peter Hitchens on his bicycle? So I'm standing there. And Peter Hitchens, and I'm kind of in a world of my own. And by the time I realize Peter Hitchens is like maybe 2 meters in front of me, and I freak out. I realize who he is, one of my intellectual kind of heroes. And as I decide to call out his name, he's like turned the corner around behind me and has cycled off. So I turn around, I chase around this corner in like suburban London, and I start yelling after him. And what then happens is probably one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. I just wanted the earth to swallow me up. I forgot his name, and instead of calling him Peter Hitchens, which is his name, I called him after his brother, Christopher Hitchens. And of course, his brother has died from cancer quite recently, and his brother is also decently more well-known than him. So I'm yelling, Christopher Hitchens. I was like, Christopher Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens. Down this road, the people staring at me with him on his bicycle. He didn't really hear me. And then I suddenly thought in my head, I was like, oh, Jesus, his name isn't Christopher. What's his name? And I couldn't remember his name. I was like, Christopher's his brother. And so I just started yelling, Mr. Hitchens, down this road. And eventually he heard me. And he turned around and he was like, sorry, who are you? I don't think I know you. I was like, Mr. Hitchens, like, do I know you? Do I know you? In like this really gruff British voice. I was like, no, you don't know me. And he was like, well, then who are you? And I was like, I'm a big fan of yours. I really like your work. Can I have a picture with you? And so he's standing there on his bicycle in the middle of the road, cars going past him. And then he's like, look, well, I'm awfully really sorry, but I have to catch my train. I'm cycling to my train, so I can't stop. And I'm like, oh, okay, then off you go, goodbye. And he's like, goodbye. And then he just blasts off on his bicycle. Oh dear. And I was like, oh my God, there's just Peter Hitchens. So
Wow.
There you go.
This is the episode of anecdotes, isn't it?
It is. Have you ever met anyone crazy in like a random scenario, Tiago?
No, not really. I mean, that's kind of just the thing of living in Perth. You don't
I mean,
see
and
that
then what
many
about Friendly
I'm
Jordies?
sure we've told
We
the
ran
story
into
on
him.
the show. We ran into him. Well, Will literally ran into him. We were
Well, he ran into me.
He ran into you. We were at the old Rosemount Hotel about to watch Friendly Jordies live show last year, and we were at the very back of the line because we forgot to line up. And Friendly Jordies was running to get on stage, I suppose. And it's like, oh, excuse me, this really short man bustles by and bumps into William, and we're like, oh, that's okay. And as he goes past, was that
We
Friendly
look back.
Jordies?
Was that Friendly Jordies?
That was probably yeah, that was a good one.
If you don't know, Friendly Jordies is like a medium level kind of Australian celebrity who he's like a political comedian who leans left.
Yeah. Labour shill. I have a shirt with his face on it. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. But anyway, so there you go. Boris Johnson's been in Perth. I pulled Peter Hitchens after his brother. And Tiago has a shirt with Friendly Jordies' face on it.
And you bring up Roger Cook's assistant that one time.
Yeah.
What about the time?
Oh, dear.
We've got 5 minutes left, Will. What about the time you ran into Scott Morrison at a pub?
Oh, can we talk about that? Okay. So I think I might have already said this on the podcast as well, but we're just chucking them all in. But It was on the eve of the 2022 Australian federal election, which obviously went very well for the Liberal Party. And I was up in non-disclaimer, I am still a member of the Liberal Party. And I still get emails from them. And there was this thing called, what was it? It was like afternoon tea with the Prime Minister or morning tea with the Prime Minister for free. And I was like, sure, sign me up. So myself and a bandwagon of comrades blasted up north. And it was really weird. It was like in Mindari or somewhere, like this brand new kind of built like shopping precincts and parking lot. And you know when like those new West Australian shopping precincts and they all feel quite like not very genuine and there's like this like cafe with fake plants and on the wall it says like good vibes only, stuff like that.
They're gonna go out and visit.
So we're in
like
one of them.
months.
So we're in one of them. And my friend, and so myself and my good friend, who were perhaps not taking things too seriously, we were standing around this table with this big plan of like this new sporting complex that we're going to build across the road. And for some reason there were like trees on the plan, and we were making jokes about how we were going to cut trees down, or we were going to grow more trees or something. We were just making fun of trees. And we were standing by this plan, pointing at things, pretending to be proper. And next thing you know, this massive bustling herd of cameramen and journalists and mic holders like shoved us out of the way. And in comes big bumbling kind of, seemed like he was on some kind of drug, Scott Morrison, like just really like bustling with energy. And he bumbles in like straight to where me and my friend and I were just standing, and he holds up the plan, which just my friend and I were just pointing at, and is like talking about it to the cameras, and we're going to build this here and we're going to build that there, and so many jobs and growth, and it will help the environment and sport and all this good Aussie liberal investing in the community, and he does all this stuff. And then he puts the plan down, answers a few questions, and then runs off. And that was on the eve of his defeat. I think that might have been
Why was he in Perth on the eve of his defeat?
It wasn't it wasn't the eve. I think the election was on like the 20th of May. I think this was like the 6th of May, 7th of May. But it was the crunch time of the election campaign.
I remember that night I caught a train with you, and we both sort of said to each other, I'm pretty sure the Liberals are going to win, and we were both wrong. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, we were, that's right, we went into the city that night, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, good times.
Good times. Anyway, that's our cue. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I mean, it was a good mix of parliamentary procedure and fun little anecdotes, so I hope you had fun. If you would like to support the show, don't forget to subscribe, tell a friend. Our numbers aren't doing fantastically anymore. That might have something to do with the fact we're very infrequently posting at the moment. But I'm still posting clips on the Instagram, so if you're holding out for some fence sitters content, then you can hop over there and have a look. We will be back. I'm not going to say next week. We'll be back at some point. And we hope you join us then too. Any last thoughts, Will?
I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, or evening, or afternoon, or wherever you are. And I wish you all the best.
Okay, see you, boys.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.